I have listed here on our first slide our website. Please visit our website. We have a lot of resources, particularly related to the distance learning and supports for teachers and parents right now in this transition time. We also have some information about upcoming events, and we will be using this website as we move forward and continue to post things that are coming up. Remember that your Louisiana AIM team is here to support you even now. So please be sure to contact any of us if we can help you in any way. For those of you that are not familiar with Louisiana AIM, we support your districts in a variety of ways. We come out and do trainings for your district, for schools, for teachers, for SLPs. We do student consults, and we also have a lending library. In that lending library, we have a variety of low-tech and high-tech, mid-tech things that we can bring out to your school. You can try for your student, and then figure out if that's working before you purchase that for your student. So be sure to follow us on Twitter or on Facebook to keep up with what is going on and in the upcoming events that we have. Okay, so our objective today is to discover some resources that we have available to comprehensively understand AAC and communication needs of our complex communicators. We're going to first just talk about beginning communicators, the variety of ways they communicate, and how you can assess their communicative intent. We're going to critique the value and the oppositional view of screenings versus assessments. We're going to discover some language hierarchies that we can use with our complex communicators when trying to assess their communication needs. We're going to state some readily available communication screenings and list some systematic matrices that we can utilize for a comprehensive AAC assessment. We're going to look at all these resources that you have available for hierarchies, screenings, and assessments. So first, let's talk about who. Who, when we are looking at AAC assessment or beginning AAC, what students are we talking about that we are going to utilize AAC with? And we just want to go ahead and talk about a myth that exists out there. We hear this a lot. People say, oh, we can't begin AAC with this student. They don't understand cause and effect, or they don't show communicative intent, or they don't have the cognitive ability that is needed to begin AAC, or they're too young. These are not true. These are myths, and they are not prerequisite skills that are needed to begin AAC with our students. They are certainly factors that can impact their performance and their progress, but they are not factors that keep us from beginning AAC. This is right out of ASHA, and if you look across materials that are out there for or by people that are proficient in AAC, the gurus, you're going to see that this is a thought that is consistent across all of these people, or all of the field. So let's first talk about communicative intent. This is our students that we have that really pose a challenge for looking at AAC. We are not real sure what they're trying to communicate with us often. We have difficulty getting them to engage, and we just truly don't know how to start or where to start to shape their communication. Here we have a picture of a baby, right? Now we all know that this baby is crying, and that is the behavior that a baby is innately born with. They cry, and then we know that this baby is indicating to us that they have a want or that they need help. So we take that behavior of that baby and we shape that into some communication, because we talk to babies from the beginning, right? So when that baby is crying and we give the baby a bottle or we put the baby to sleep, we are attaching some language, some communication to that behavior of that baby. Well, everyone communicates. We have students that come to school who still are at that level of communication where they're not using words, they're just using behaviors to communicate to us. And we have to understand and begin to look at what are they trying to say with those behaviors. So I have a real short video that we're going to share here.
Everyone communicates. Some students did not intentionally communicate with us, but we can learn to watch them closely and attribute meaning to behaviors we observe. We can note their smiles, grimaces, efforts to pull away, and efforts to reach out. We can name those behaviors and tell students what we see and what we think the behaviors mean. Then we can show them how they could express themselves using symbols.
Okay, so when we're talking about this level of communication, we're going to talk about two types of communication. We're going to talk about symbolic communication, which this is our verbal speech, our sign, and our symbols. And then we have non-symbolic communication. And this is gestures, vocalizations, and behaviors. Our beginning communicators are at this non-symbolic stage of communication. They are using behaviors and gestures and vocalizations to communicate to us. And it is our job to shape those behaviors and those vocalizations into communication. So how do we do that? This really can pose a challenge for us. So I'm going to share with you two tools that can help you do this. The first is what we would call just a communication dictionary. And in this communication dictionary, you would identify the behavior that you observe in the student. Just simply state what the student is doing. So you have something that you're trying to get the student to interact with, and then you're going to observe their behavior. Now that behavior could be a rejection behavior, or it could be a behavior of interest. But whatever that behavior is, you're going to list that behavior. You're going to then try to determine the intent of the behavior, what the student is trying to tell you, and then how can you respond and shape that communication? What can you say and do in response to that behavior that student is exhibiting? So let's look at a communication dictionary. And let me say that you will all get a link to this presentation. And you will have all of the tools that we are going to share today. You will have access to every one of these. Okay, so this is a communication dictionary. Like we were talking about, in the first column, you would just list a behavior that you observe. So you have something that you're trying to interact with the student, and they look away, they turn their head away. Okay, so what are they trying to tell you? They're trying to tell you that they're not interested in that activity. And then how could you respond? Well, you could speak to them and say, oh, you're looking away. You're telling me you don't like whatever it is that you're engaging in. You could use your core words here and just simply say, don't like, stop. And that could even be part of your assessment. So you can, I want to caution you here. I want to say that if you do in your assessment, you're looking at these behaviors, you're trying to determine their intent, and then you begin trying to shape some kind of language, some core vocabulary, some picture supports, or use of a mid-tech device. If the student doesn't automatically respond and utilize it, don't determine at that moment, oh, well, this is not something that they're going to do. These students need lots and lots of exposure, lots of models. And that isn't the purpose of today's webinar, so we're not going to get into that any further, but it is valuable information that you could use in your assessment. Just be careful in not making decisions of, oh, well, they didn't do it, so they can't do it. So anyway, as you see, you can there's just some examples here of some common behaviors that we tend to see. Maybe they reach for something, that means they want it, and then how you could respond and shape that. So this is just a great way to help you think about those behaviors and shape them into some form of communication. Okay, so now we're going to look at an interest inventory. For these level communicators, it is often so very difficult to figure out things that they are interested in. And we know that communication needs to be intrinsically rewarding. They need to want to be interested in what you have in order to get them to communicate or interact with you. And I know that this can be such a challenge sometimes. Very often, we try only the things that we have readily available because it's just what we have. And so we try it and then we say, oh, well, that student didn't like anything. But what we really need to do is make sure that we are utilizing reinforcers across a variety of sensory inputs. And this would include visual, auditory, tactile, vestibular, smell, and taste. So let's look at an example of an interest inventory. Now, the one that I'm sharing with you today is one that I have used for a long time. That is, oops, I lost it. The one that I'm sharing with you today, where did it go? There it is a very old one that I have used that is made by Pyramid Educational Consultants, which is the people that produce the PEX products. There are other of these out there. If you are a LAMP Words for Life user, they provide one in their manual. And I'm sure that you can search and find others. What I like about this one is you can truly use this as a part of your assessment because it lists a behavior that you observe in the student. So if you notice that your student is one who gazes at lights or out the window, fixates at rotating objects, looks at his hands or flaps his fingers in front of his eyes, then you would try some visual stimulus. And there's a list here of all kinds of different visual stimulus that you can try. If the student vocalizes, hums, clicks his tongue, taps furniture, then you would want to try some auditory stimulus. If the student touches himself, touches other people, pinches himself, places his fingers in his mouth, then you would want to try some tactile stimulus. If the student rocks, bounces, spins his body, toe walks, holds his head on one side, head bangs, then you would want to try some vestibular or proprioceptive movements. If the student smells himself, other people, or other items, then you would want to use some things that have smell. And in the same sense, if the student licks himself or other people, licks objects, puts them in his mouth, then you would want to use oral motor stimulus. So this is a great tool just to help you try to figure out what you can get the student to engage in. And along with this, there is a reinforcer worksheet that allows you to present that item to the student and then to give them a score based on how they respond to that item. So if they reject it, if they have no reaction, If they try to obtain it when it's out of reach, they show signs of pleasure, take it again, protest, all of these things, you can give them a score, and then you total that score, and then you list the things that are a higher preference to the student and then non-preferred items. So this is a great tool to help you with those students that really can pose some challenges as far as what they're interested in and how to get them interacting to begin some communication training. These are really two great tools that can help you with these students that present some challenges. Okay, so now we're going to move into how do we move into AAC assessment for students that are across all ability levels. When we're talking about students that use AAC, we're not just talking about students that are nonverbal or limited verbal, but we have students that have verbal abilities, but their speech is unintelligible. They have apraxia of speech, or their language is just not at the level that it should be for their age. So how are we going to begin looking at this? We're going to talk about assessment versus screening. So first, let's talk about assessment. The pros of assessment is that it will give you a more comprehensive view of the whole child. It helps you in your goal planning. Often your assessments will give you some data that's graphable that you can present to your team, and this is what is accepted by insurance. Insurance is going to require a full assessment before we can look at getting student their own AAC device. The cons of AAC assessment is it can be time consuming. It can require a whole lot of information that maybe you feel like has already been put into the pupil appraisal evaluation, and here you're having to implement that into another evaluation. There is some prerequisite vocabulary that needs to be understood. An AAC assessment is going to have subjective interpretation. And by this is just different than our typical language evaluations and articulation evaluations, or determining for learning disability. We have very specific criteria that lets us know exactly what we need to say whether a student meets that criteria or not. We don't have that for AAC as much. It's a lot more of a subjective interpretation. So now let's look at screening. The pros of screening would be they definitely are more time effective. The terminology is often easier to understand, and there is a little more flexible interpretation. Now, our cons, our screenings are not accepted by insurance. We don't pull in all that information from all of our service providers. There's a little more limited modes of language and intent explored in a screening. And we don't typically have a lot of suggestion for progression in therapy or in teaching or setting of goals. So let's talk about some methods that we have to help us with our assessment and screening. We're first going to look at some language progression hierarchies. And what these allow us to do is these language progression hierarchies take typical language development, and we use these to help determine the language level of our complex communicators. We are going to look at 5 different hierarchies. And the first one that we're going to look at is Laureate's linguistic hierarchy. Okay, so in this hierarchy, language is broken up into 7 stages of language. As you can see, we progress from stage 1. Does the student demonstrate an understanding of cause and effect? And what I like about this, this hierarchy is it's simply asking you a question in the first column that you are going to answer yes or no. If your answer is yes, you progress to the next stage. If your answer is no, then you know that this is the stage of development that your student is performing. And then you're able to say, okay, they are at the interpreted communication stage. These are some characteristics that would be evident in my student. And then here are some goals that I could set when my student is at this stage. This hierarchy, so like I said, it begins with cause and effect. It moves through the understanding and use of any words, beginning to combine words, spontaneously using short, simple sentences, beginning to use more complex sentences, and then we're moving into that student that's beginning to read, and then we have that student who's really become literate and really proficient in their AAC language. So this is a great tool, not comprehensive, but could give you some great information to get started. The next tool that we're going to look at is Brown's Stages for AAC users. Okay, so Brown, in the literature, Brown has identified five stages of typical language development. And this just takes those typical stages of language development and adapts them for the language and literacy of our AAC users. Now, I want to mention here, we talked a few minutes ago about that student that you might be beginning AAC with, maybe even later because they have apraxia of speech and their speech is not intelligible or their language skills are not at the level of their other grade level peers, so they're verbal. They have some language. I like to mention that all of these hierarchies and assessments and screenings, you can be utilizing these to think about their verbal language in comparison to their AAC language. And the reason why I mention that is I myself have been in that situation where I have started to work with a student who is verbal. And they have apraxia and they're speaking in some complex sentences, but we just have difficulty understanding them. And so we've decided it's time to implement AAC. Well, my first inclination is to sit down and begin their AAC at the level of their verbal abilities. But what I've learned is that student really needs to progress through these language stages with their AAC language. So sometimes it could be very beneficial for you when you're working with a student similar to that to not just look at their AAC language stage, but also to think about this in comparison to their verbal language stage. Just a little tidbit of information there. So, okay, so looking at Brown's language stage. In stage 1, you can see this is where symbolic language for communication is just beginning. The emergent communicator is learning to direct activities, to comment, to request, to label. Most of the utterances are one word. They're a comment or a one-word sentence. Often they're just request and not some of those other language skills. And in this first stage, we would just have them, this would be where they would just have up to 75 single words. Here's some examples of some core words, and then some language objectives that you could set for this student if this is the level that you would be starting with their AAC. And then this last column connects these stages of development to some of the learning objectives. I would love, these do not include the LEAP connectors, and that is something I would love to work on in the upcoming months. So look for that as we update that. That will probably be posted on our website if we are able to do that. And so if you look at Brown stages, he just begins to progress into stage 2. They're beginning to combine words to make phrases, and then gives you some examples. And then this would be your goals or your objectives, and then how they would tie to the grade level objectives. And moving all the way, I'm not going to read all of these tools because we do have a lot of them to share. And so I do want to just share, look at each one of these. So as Brown stages goes through to stage 5, this is where we would really see that communicator who's beginning to use articles, past tense. This is where we want to see our students get to. And hopefully these hierarchies will help us to set our goals and progress through from this stage 1 all the way, with this being our goal for our students. Okay, that was Brown stages for AAC users. We're now going to look at AAC ability levels. Okay, this is a real simple tool that just breaks AAC communication into the emergent user, the context dependent user, the context independent user, and the literate user. All you do with this tool is you are just looking for the characteristics that your student exhibits. And you're going to, now what we find with most of these tools, most of our students do not fit into just one category. They're going to have splinter skills that are across several of these categories sometimes. And when that happens, you are just looking to see where they have the most concentrated amount of skills, and then determine, have they mastered that level? Are we going to set our goals at the next level, or do we still have some work to do within this level? And each one of these give you a primary goal that if you did determine that they are an emergent AAC user, then what your primary goal would be. So again, not very comprehensive, but just gives you some good information if you just need a little quick way to look at their levels. Oops. Our next tool is the Access Learning Process for AAC. And this is going to be a very valuable tool for our students who exhibit some difference in, we want to look at their ability to access AAC. And so this tool kind of works from the bottom up when you're thinking about level of proficiency. And we begin with a novice learner, moving all the way up to an expert user in this first column. In this next column, it talks about what you're going to be looking at for their activity and their movement with their AAC device. So this is really a great way to help you look at how the student is able to control and participate with that AAC device, with their movement and their activity. So if you look at the novice learner, maybe when you brought that AAC device out, maybe they're showing excited interest in it by looking, by touching it. Maybe they're not reacting to it at all, or they're rejecting it. That would be your novice learner. And then you're just going to move all the way up to, if you look up here to your proficient learner, they have controlled smooth tool use for interaction and communication. They have refinement of their movement and fluency. They can use the full scope of the communication device. And so it just kind of takes you through each level that you can look at and determine at what level is your student. Then in our next column, we have understanding of AAC device use. Okay, and so our novice user is going to have no idea how to use the AAC device for interaction and communication. Our curious novice is going to have awareness that something happens at activation, but they're not conscious of where, when, how. Moving all the way up to your expert user, who is just automatic. They can use this for interaction and communication in most of their situations. Your next column looks at attention. And so again, your novice user would be maybe alert, maybe curious when you brought the device out, or whatever form of AAC you have in front of them. Or they may not be focused at all. They may be very passive, distractible. Moving all the way to our expert, who they are fully attentive. Their attention is well established and sustained. And then our next column looks at the social interaction with the device. So they have limited interaction with others, would be your novice learner. Your curious novice would respond to interactions, some eye contact, some behavioral mirroring. Moving all the way up to your expert, who can consistently and simultaneously interact with the tool, the environment, and the social partners. And then last, we have expressions and emotions. So what kind of emotions does the student present with when you have this AAC device? Are they indifferent? Are they anxious? Are they seem open to it? Moving all the way to your expert, who really depends on their device. So this is a great tool to look across at these different, not really looking at the language aspect of AAC, but looking more at the motor ability, the understanding of it, the attention, social interaction, and then kind of the emotion that they share with the device. Our last hierarchy that we're going to talk about is the ASHA Functional Communication Measure. This is really just something we wanted to share. ASHA has this across several different areas, and we thought this could be useful for those of you that if you are in one of those districts, or really probably most of the SLPs fall under some form of professional growth plan. Your teachers are still under the Compass plan usually, but either way, if this can help you with writing your objectives for your professional growth, you can identify a group of students that you will be working on AAC comprehension, determine what level each student is at currently, moving from profound all the way to independent, and then setting a goal for if you want them to increase 1 level, 2 levels, whatever you think is feasible in that year time. And they have this for both your communication understanding with AAC as well as production. So we just wanted to share that in case that could be beneficial for you in that way. Okay, so that sums up our hierarchies. Let's now look at some screenings. The first screening is put out by Toby Dynavox, and it's called the Communication Success Screening. This screening is pretty simple. This is really a tool for you to use when you're asking yourself the question, I'm really starting to think about implementing some AAC with this student, and is that appropriate? Is this really a student that is appropriate for AAC. It asks you 16 questions that you answer yes, no. Pretty simple. You just have to answer yes, no. And you count the number of yes responses. And if you have 5 or more yes responses, then this individual might be a good candidate for AAC intervention. So nothing real comprehensive about it, just something to kind of help you with that decision making. If you're kind of struggling with whether or not this is a student that you want to utilize AAC with. The next screening is the AAC Classroom Screener. Okay, so this screening to me looks a little bit like Brown's hierarchy in that it has 5 stages of language. So as you can see, it progresses from the single word stage of language all the way to the using a variety of sentences with complexity and just really participating in conversation with their device. So you ask yourself, how does the communication of this student look? So you identify what stage based on these language skills. And then in the next column, it talks about, well, what types of words are used at this stage? Is the student using mostly core words or familiar vocabulary or high frequency words? And it even allows you to list some of those words. Moving into stage 2, where those core words are becoming a little more related to their content. And then progressing into some more specific language. And now you begin to see them kind of groping for some vocabulary with their AAC device. Like they know that there's some words in there that they want and they're trying to find them. And then moving all the way into that last stage where we have very technical language related to their content area. The next column gives you the ability to say the student demonstrates this. And so you can kind of read through these skills and determine where your student falls. And then you can ask yourself this question, when to move up to the next stage. And it gives you an answer to that question to help you, okay, we've been working at single word level and now we're ready to move on to phrases and short sentences. So this is just a basic screening that'll help, again, not super comprehensive, but will help you in beginning to collect that information. Oops, I did it again. Okay, the last screening that we're gonna look at is by Language Lab. Now, Language Lab is, they do offer a paid subscription. I think it's $30, $40 a year. Lots and lots of things that you get access to with that paid subscription. And if you did have that paid subscription, you would be able to utilize this screening online. However, the free version allows you to print this screening right here. And so you are able to use it even in the free version. We're going to watch just a short video that'll tell you about this screening.
The screener allows users to quickly assess the stage of language development that their student is in and how to determine when they are ready to move forward to the next stage. You can download a printed version of the screener or use the online version. Just simply add your student's name to get started. Simply check off the skill level of your student for each language objective. When you reach the point when you have clicked all nevers, you will be prompted to choose to continue or to finish. The screener will show where to get started on the lab based on the skills of your student. You can also download the results so you can track your student's progress. So slide on down and get started.
So that's just a little bit about the AAC Language Lab screening. And like I said, you do have the availability to use the printed version of that screening. So where is the rest? This is really, when looking at screenings, this was really the best few that we came up with. There are not a whole lot of screenings available because of those reasons that we discussed at the beginning, that really for AAC, we need a more comprehensive look at the student, especially when we're talking about getting devices paid for. So let's move into our assessments. First, we're going to talk about the communication matrix. Now, this has been around for a long time, and I know that some districts have used this. We do want to mention, up until recently, in fact, I logged into this week, and this was the first time that this notice had come up, that it has been free in the past. I do remember a few years back, it came up that they may have to start charging, and that had not happened until now. It says that beginning in July, they will have to start charging a nominal fee to those who use this online assessment for more than 5 times in 12 months. Now you can click down here for more information and find out what those fees are. But let's look at the value that the communication matrix can provide for you. So I'm just going to click here to try it. So after, if you want to go in and try it as well, this is what you would do. I'm not going to register. I'm just going to go over, let's see, hold on. I did this last time too. Okay. So the way the communication matrix is set up, this is a great tool for a team to sit around and answer these questions together. Because typically when we're looking at these students and you're getting that input from the whole team, this is just a great tool that allows you to sit and walk through these questions and answer what you all know about the student. So I'm going to say that this is an individual. Okay, so it will give you a question or a statement about the student. This individual doesn't seem to have real control over their body yet. And so the question reads, the only way I know that he wants something is because he fusses or whines when he's unhappy or uncomfortable, and he smiles, makes noises, or calms down when he's happy and comfortable. Does this statement describe this individual? Okay, so you answer yes, this is them, or no, they're not even here yet. Okay, so this is an option, and you're going to see this throughout the question. So no, this is beyond my child. This is beyond the student we're talking about. Or no, this student is beyond this. They can do way more than this. And so this is where you would click no. And it's just going to continue to go through these types of questions. This individual has control over their own behavior, but they don't use them to try to communicate to me. Does this statement describe the individual? And I'm going to say, no, this student has surpassed this stage. This individual clearly tries to communicate their needs to me through gestures, sounds, or language. No, this stage is beyond the student's ability. Okay, and so the more you go through these questions, because I'm just doing a try it, it goes ahead and kicks me to this. But this will show you the chart that it produces when you reach the end. And so it plateaus the student. And so for this student, we answered questions about pre-intentional behavior and intentional behavior. And you can see that we said the student had surpassed all of these skills. If we were to go on and continue, we might say that a student had mastered or they were emerging, and it would color code and give you that idea. So then you might know that that student is in the conventional communication stage, and these are the things that you would be working on that student. So the communication matrix is really a great, it's really a great tool for teams to utilize together and to really share that input. And as I was walking through some of these questions recently, there's even some videos that pop up that after it asks you a question about the student, it will show a video to try to help you better understand the behavior that they're trying to describe so that you can make sure that you're answering that question correctly. The next assessment that we're going to look at is the Toby Dynavox DAG-2. which stands for Dynamic AAC Goals Grid 2. Okay, so this assessment gives you some tips for how to use this as an initial assessment, how you can use this for reassessment or reevaluation. Now, like most of these tools, it does state that, you know, again, these are not like your standardized tests where you have to follow certain, you know, guidelines. You have to give these first 5 and stop and reach a basal and all that. It just gives you some suggestions, but you can adapt and use these tools that best fits the needs of your students. This tool is designed with 5 ability level continuums. You have the emergent ability level, the emergent transitional, moving through to your context dependent, your transitional independent, and then your independent. Did I skip over that one? Context, transitional, and independent. Okay, so within each one of these continuums, there is an area for understanding, expression, social interaction, literacy skills, and then other. How you use this tool is you simply go through these skills that are listed, and you are indicating what skills your student presents with, what students you feel like they are capable of doing. And then, like some of the others, you're going to have splinter skills. You're going to have skills that are across different continuums. And then you're going to collect your data at the end and determine, okay, I really think that my student is an emergent in understanding. And so we're going to set our goals in the emergent level for understanding. So when you scroll through this tool, at the end, they have a nice little area for you to mark which level the student falls in for each one of those skills. And then the great thing about this that I've gotten a lot of feedback from some SLPs that are using this is so helpful in determining your goals and in progress monitoring, because you can utilize this to set your goals now for your emergent transitional, and so forth. And then when they've mastered a goal, you can use this column to indicate that they've mastered a goal mastered here. And then this is your cueing levels. So moving from physical assistance to direct pointer cue, to direct verbal cue, to indirect cue. Okay. And
10 minutes remaining.
Okay, thank you. So this tool is helpful for progress monitoring. So when you set your goals, you can use this for at the end of 9 weeks or at that annual IEP time to look and determine their progress. So I'm going to go on because we do only have 10 minutes remaining in our webinar, and I want to make sure that we get to each one of our tools, so you will have time to just kind of look through these on your own. The next one is this is an assessment that is being created by a professor at Louisiana State University in Baton Rouge. My colleagues Justin Sims and Katie Sample are both participating with this professor in helping to get people across the state engaged in this utilizing this assessment. They're hoping that they'll get people interested and on board, and she will be presenting her results from this tool at a conference in the fall, I think somewhere tropical, and so you might get a chance to be involved in that. I'm going to play a short tutorial about that.
Hi, this is Justin Sims from Louisiana AIM with a short tutorial of how to access and complete the LSU Communication Department's AAC screening. Firstly, all the necessary steps to download the VPN are in visual format here at this address. Now, to formally begin the process, make sure to enter in this address into your toolbar. Here you need to type in these credentials as follows. Manually select and click Download. Continue to click Yes and accept the terms of agreement until you can finally install. Make sure Cisco Connect is running in your action tray at the bottom right. If not, launch the app from their Start menu. When you're able to select Cisco Connect in the action tray, you will be prompted to type in these credentials once more. Once the login is complete, you will be in LSU's virtual private network. You can now type in the following URL into any web browser of your choice. Here, make sure to answer every question and even typing NA when it's not applicable. A checkmark must appear for each section so you can submit. Now, once you hit submit, make sure to save as a PDF. You may then give it a date and a code name for the student, and email it to Daphne Hartzheim. Any suggestions for improvement in this email are also appreciated. If you have any questions, you may contact me via email here. Thank you.
Okay, and so Justin also lets people know that that password that had that 24 at the end, very often they prompt him to update that password. So if you go in and you try 24 and it doesn't work, try 25, 26, because he just keeps adding on to that number. They are really excited about that and would love to get some more people involved with utilizing that tool. Okay, we have 3 left to go over, and our time is running pretty short. So I'm going to quickly show you. This one is the Communication Sampling and Analysis. It is a paid subscription. It is $99 a year. But I do want to show you, it may be something that you want to ask your district to purchase. It was created with those students that are challenging to assess in mind. And I want to show you the wonderful things that it can do for you. Particularly, so these are the type of reports that it can generate. So it has all this information that it's prompting you to put in. And then these are the type of reports that you would be able to generate. This sample report has the setting that you have engaged the student in, and then what behaviors have you observed. And then what I love about this is it includes a piece for how did the partner respond to the communicator, which is so very important in our AAC use. So let's go back and let's look at the communication summary report. Now, what I think looks so helpful about this is within the sample of all the questions that you are answering and you're going through in this system, they are actually giving a, so if you look at request object, the student had one time that they requested the object out of 20. Yeah, no, okay, yielding a 20%. So out of however many times that request object came available in the assessment, and then it gives some data. So you're actually given a percentage that these particular functions occurred within this sample. I'm sorry, I'm rushing through this. And then the last thing that it'll do for you is it will give you a narrative report with some very beautiful graphs. So if you look here, we have some graphs that are very color-coded and very, very beneficial information to share with teams, parents. So very, very nice. Okay, so that was the communication sample. We have 2 left. Let's see, let's just quickly, I'm just going to show them to you and tell you the benefits of these. What I love about this one is this one is really looking at students' ability on screen. Since we are using some high tech, or we're using a lot of apps on iPads for communication, it really starts at the very basic level of cause and effect. But what I like about this one that's probably different from a lot of the other ones is it actually gives you tasks to set up, which can help you in your assessment. So here, does the student understand that touching and looking at the screen can cause a response, activating a switch? And then it gives you apps for you to try. And then of course you have all your different prompting levels, visual attention, number of activations that you can list. It is a great, great tool, moving all the way through picture discrimination, all the way up to, I'm going to show you up to some core word comprehension, and then it really goes even into some of your literacy skills. And so it really walks you through many different levels that could be involved in your AAC assessment. I'm sorry that we don't have time to review this any further, but I did want to at least show that to you. We have 1 left, and this would be by Gail Van Tatenhove, which is really the AAC expert out there in the field. And this is a very comprehensive assessment that could be so beneficial when trying to get some devices paid for, particularly by a payment source. You have just your basic information at the beginning, your interview information, observations, what perceptual skills that the student has, their motor abilities, moving all the way through their motor skills ability for transporting an AAC device. What needs do they have for that? What are their cognitive abilities? What's their vocabulary generation? What's their speech skills, receptive language, moving all the way through expressive language output, and then getting into what devices, I want to show you this, what AA systems have you tried, manual boards, speech generating devices, what app, describing that. Just really helps you pull together all this information that you have, that you need for these very comprehensive AAC assessments. Okay, that brings us to the end of our webinar. We really hope that we have provided you with a great toolkit for your AAC assessment. please remember to contact any of us on your Louisiana AIM team to support you in any way that we can. I have listed here Justin and Katie's emails because they were they both helped create this presentation, as well as they are both involved in the LSU project. Justin is in Central Louisiana, Katie is in South, and I am in the North. So, but you can contact any of your Louisiana AIM team members, and we will be glad to support in any way. And we are so thankful for you joining us today, and we look forward to supporting you in the future.